when you're growing up, you want to be a fireman, you want to be a pilot, you want to be a policeman. No one wants to sell health insurance.
All right. Well, I mean, before, I don't know, do we take the shot now or after?
Yeah.
All right. So then we'll do our quick intro.
Cheers.
This is what happens when you come on the podcast. Welcome, Jamie. No sipping. Oof.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Good.
Yes.
Feeling great.
All right. Well, welcome, guests. As you can see, we're having a great time already. This is Inside Copy Not the Podcast. And I am here with Jamie Schutzer, who's the board chairman of the Business Council of Westchester, a relatively recent appointment. Congrats on that. We're going to talk about that.
Thank you.
And he's also a senior partner at JDM Benefits, which is actually how I came to know you many years ago. Welcome, Jamie. Thank you so much for sharing a shot with me and sharing some time with me.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes. All right. So we know each other. We go back quite a few years. But I really want the audience to get to know you. I think you're a fascinating person. You have a really cool new position. Mm-hmm. You know that Copy and Art is an active member of the BCW, and we've been with the Business Council for a long time now. And, it's really interesting. I'd like for you to start, if you don't mind, talking to our audience about your commitment to Westchester, which is why I think you're a perfect guest here today, because we're so committed and this is our home. But what are your strategic objectives? How do you feel about this appointment? What are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for having me here. And I will also mention you are a past Hall of Fame winner. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I've lived in Westchester County since 2003. I spent probably my first, it was about 6 years commuting into the city. So, what I knew about Westchester County at the time was I knew where the house was, I knew where the park was, I knew where the schools were, the local bar.
We knew a little bit.
Yeah.
He knew about the bar.
But I didn't really know much about the business community. So when I decided 12 years ago to bring my business into Westchester County, and I partnered up with Joe Machino, who's my business partner, I said, well, how am I going to get to know businesses in Westchester County?
Good question.
Yeah, and a good friend of his who he connected me to was very involved with the Business Council of Westchester. So we had a dinner together, we were strategizing, and he said, the first thing you need to do is join the BCW. I said, okay. And I did, I joined, and I went to my first event, and I knew no one. And I consider myself a friendly person, outgoing, my kids joke around, I could talk to a wall, but I was nervous because, you don't know, how does this work? You don't want to be one of those who just has a business card and say, here you go. So that first meeting, I walked out of there and maybe met a few people, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. How am I going to really infiltrate and get to know people? And it takes time, and going back to another event and another event, and then getting to know someone who will then introduce you to someone else, and then it just snowballs until you get to know the folks on like a Marsha Gordon, who's the president and CEO, and you start having conversation at a very high level, and then you volunteer. I was the co-chair of the golf committee. I put some time and effort into that, and eventually elevated to getting onto the board, which was a huge, it was a huge accomplishment to me. Here again, going back a few years earlier, I sat in a room, didn't say hello to anyone, didn't know anyone, to now being on the board.
Sure.
Yeah. And then from there, just, working hard, attending events, being active, and ultimately getting onto the executive committee, which is, a smaller subset of the board, maybe 10, 12 people, and working hard there, becoming the treasurer for a number of years, and then ultimately to the board chair. And all along the way, from that first meeting 12 years ago to now, I've had the pleasure of meeting so many great people. I call some of them friends. I call some of them friends and clients. But I've just, I've grown my network here in 12 years exponentially, and joining the BCW was the best move I could have made.
I mean, it's interesting because I think there's a nugget of learning and insight there, because I felt the exact same way when I first walked into a networking event, because obviously it's a pretty tight-knit business council. And so you'll see people chatting and it's almost daunting to think that you don't know any of them and you need to kind of go and talk to people. And I would say, for our audience, it's interesting, but there's probably a commonality here, maybe a little lesson, which is it's good to go outside of your comfort zone, and networking is the way of business. So we're going to talk about how that kind of courage and that decision that you made to not only join but become more active and more active led to this board position, this chair position, and what does that mean? So, like, when you say you're the chair, I mean, what does that come with? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for the organization?
So it's funny. Yesterday, when I had mentioned earlier there was a big event with the governor, and I was fortunate enough to be at that event. And I sent a picture of the name card to my kids, and it said chairman of the board. So I sent the text, and one of my kids quickly texts back. He goes, "I thought you were the president."
And Marsha was like, no.
No, I said the president is Marsha Gordon.
Who's going to be on our podcast in a couple of episodes. Who is
an employee and has been an employee and the leader of the Business Council for
22 years.
Over 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I had to explain to him what it actually means to be, board chair.
Sure.
And the board is composed of about 60 individuals, all either business owners, leaders within their organization, nonprofits. And as the board chair, you're essentially the leader of that group. And what it means in terms of responsibilities is, number one is board meetings is your
best friend, your new best friend.
Yeah.
Board meetings.
Yeah, board meetings. Board meetings. I've been to a lot of board meetings, but as a participant, as a board member, and it's a lot easier going to those meetings as a board member, because you can read the agenda, check through some notes, and then you can kind of get there and you can relax. As the board chair and leading those meetings with a group of 50, 60 people who are super impressive and influential in this county, it's a little nerve-wracking. I just yesterday had my second board meeting as board chair, and I was a little less nervous than the first time, but nevertheless, that night I was looking over my agenda. I was rehearsing what I was going to say. That morning I woke up, yesterday morning, it was butterflies in my stomach still, and I got there and I was very serious. And for those who know me, I have a good sense of humor and funny, but I was laser focused, and it was a very successful board meeting. And I think as time goes on and you have more experience, even though I've been to 100 board meetings, but leading those meetings is totally different.
Sure. But it must be an opportunity for you to think about what, and not to say that, we all have our approaches to leadership, and it's not to say one is better than the other, but it must be pretty cool to be able to shape the agenda and to come up with your own, right? Because you're going to have a tenure here, right? You're going to have your defined period of time to make your mark, and doing what everybody else has always done is probably not what you want to do, right? So what are some of your initial objectives in this role? How do you want to shape the organization?
Well, I think my predecessor, Heidi Davidson, did an amazing job, and it was quite honestly, it was intimidating, following in her footsteps. She led the organization through the pandemic. She started her board chair position started in January of 2020. We had one event. We had one event. We had one event, the New Year's blast in mid-January 2020, and then COVID hit,
Yeah.
and the organization and everything, right, shut down, and all the in-person events, and Heidi's leadership really got us through, and of course, Marsha, John, and the rest of the team got us through the initial dark days of COVID where everyone was home. And this is an organization that's built on a handshake, right? Being in person, meeting people, exchanging business cards. And here you are, well, no one's leaving their house. I mean,
right.
No one is like, you are like scared. You go to the supermarket, you're dressing up like in hazmat suits, you're coming home, you're undressing and you're throwing all your clothes
you're
in the washing
Lysoling your Amazon packages.
You're washing all your packages. So, Heidi did a phenomenal job, getting us through that time and then getting us out of that. So picking up where she left off was honestly, when I looked at the list of, do I want to do this or not? And one of them was honestly, do I want to follow Heidi? And but like you said, is we all have different styles, we all have different personalities. I think one of the things that makes me different is that, and I quote people, I have a good sense of humor. I bring a levity to meetings, and the advice I received was, don't change who you are, right? You are leading this group. They know who you are. And yes, you have an agenda and you have to follow it. And you have, a timeline of when you have to be out that door. But, don't lose sight of who you are.
Sure.
And to me, that's the impression that I want to leave with this group, is that, they know who I am going into this, that they're comfortable with me being the leader. I mean, there's some, big initiatives that we're working on.
Yes.
And, being the leader of the board and delivering success and growth to the BCW is what I'm about. And leaving a legacy like my predecessors left, like Heidi, and before her, Tony Justick.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yes, and I know that it's such an interesting time for businesses in Westchester. I think maybe across the country, maybe around the world, but post-pandemic comes with its own challenges. It's not like, after the lockdowns and the pandemic was quote unquote behind us, everything went back to normal. Mm-hmm. There's a new normal that businesses are navigating, their engagement issues with employees. So I know that you're dealing with, in some ways, Heidi had the challenge of the pandemic period, but in some ways you have the challenge of this post-pandemic new world, which also didn't exist before. And I know that you guys are doing some kind of important employer initiatives. Mm-hmm. I know I've been called about some of those, which are really impressive. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of your initiatives and how BCW is looking to really partner with businesses in Westchester, like in this unprecedented time?
Yep. The two biggest initiatives of the BCW right now. One is a program called WIN, which stands for Westchester Innovative Network.
Yeah.
And what we're encouraging is innovative companies who want to do business in Westchester County, whether they're located, whether those innovators are based in Westchester or maybe some of them are based outside the area, but looking to crack into the Westchester market, is finding those innovators and finding matches for those companies. So find BCW members that can benefit and pilot programs from these innovators. And we're going into year 2 of that. We had a lot of great success year 1, year 2. We're just in the midst of finding those innovators, or I should say we actually have the innovators, but it's finding the matches.
Sure.
Yeah, and then testing out their particular product or service, and that's all going on right now. But what we're encouraging is these innovators, right, to do business here, which is going to help the economy in Westchester County. The second initiative, which is newer, is talent. And that gets to your point, is it's, what I do in my day job is I'm an employee benefits advisor. So I work with employers, generally dealing with either the executive director, the CEO, the CFO, HR director. And the number one challenge that employers are facing is talent, is finding talent, is retaining that talent.
Yes.
And so that has become a big, and we heard that loud and clear at the BCW. And I hear it loud and clear in my day job at JDM Benefits. So the BCW, and this started under Heidi's leadership as the board chair last fall, chose the talent to be an issue that we were going to try to help the employer community. And there's the headless horseman is the mascot, I would say, of the BCW and the talent initiative. And it's headless, kind of
headhunter,
a play on headhunter.
Idea.
Yes, exactly. And what started out as initial thought, and I'll give Larry Gottlieb, who is our advisor on the talent initiative, credit for this, was since this was in the fall, was the pumpkin, in Sleepy Hollow.
Yes.
Forgetting the name. And tying into the headless horseman who comes from Sleepy Hollow. And there was a QR code that was encouraging people, if they were looking for a new job or look, scan that, and it brings them to a website of where they would fill out a form. And we had a few employers that started out in this pilot program, and we would drive potential candidates to those companies. Since then, we've expanded it. It went beyond the fall event into the winter wonderland in Valhalla, into the library system, into the colleges. So that's kind of part one, is trying to help employers find talent. Two is a 5-part series that starts next week, March 21st. It's a virtual series.
Yes.
And this is really geared towards employers, and specifically within those employers, those who are in charge of talent, is learning about the new world and how do you adjust to COVID and the post-COVID world, and how do you rebrand your company or your organization to kind of match what job seekers are looking for. Benefits, that's something that's near and dear to my heart, but traditional benefits, talk about medical, dental, vision, but what are employers doing
outside of here?
So
sure.
I'll use copy and art as an example. And when I first came here a couple months ago, you showed me your room over there where you had your Peloton bike.
Yeah.
So you're encouraging your employees stay healthy, but giving them that opportunity, if they don't have a bike at home, can't afford a bike, or they can't afford a gym, to be able to or they don't have the time to be able to come here at the end of the day and get a quick workout. That's something what job seekers want, right? They want employers that are thinking outside of the box, not just, okay, here's your package, you get medical, you get dental, you get vision, you get an FSA, you get life insurance, disability.
What else?
Exactly.
I was talking to Larry about this last week, because I think I'm actually going to be a part of the series.
Yes, you are.
Which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So you guys are going to have to tune in. I'm going to be talking about innovative strategies for recruitment and retention, which happen to be, I would say a strong suit. You know my team, so you know how strong they are. So the ability to attract that talent, but also keep them happy, which is no small feat, especially today. We're in office the majority of the week. Many companies are struggling in that area. So I think it's a great series. I don't want to, spend all of our time talking about the BCW as much as we love the BCW. I want to talk a little bit more about you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, good.
We're doing another shot.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Kind of kidding, kind of not. That was a double. That counts for 2, Jamie.
It is Thursday.
That's true.
Just
That's
saying.
true.
But more later.
So you've talked to us a little bit about your day job. Do you want to talk to us about what in your life kind of got you to that point where this is the job that you chose, right? You're a bright guy. You could have gone anywhere. What made you choose employee benefits and this as your passion and what you dedicated your career to?
So I'm laughing because when you're growing up, you know, you want to be a fireman, you want to be a pilot, you want to be a policeman. No one wants to sell health insurance.
But that's not all you do, obviously.
No. But so my story goes like this. My father was a New York State senator and assemblyman in the 1960s. I was born in 1971, not yet 52, but will be this year. So I came after my dad was in the legislature, New York State legislature, but he was a lobbyist. So, you know, I looked up to my dad and I said, you know what? And he was a lawyer by education. I said, I'm going to go to law school. I think that's what I'm going to do. So I was a political science major at the University at Albany, and which was nice because my dad, as a lobbyist during the state legislative session, was in Albany.
A lot.
Yeah. You know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So whenever I was needed a real meal, you know, when the cafeteria food wasn't cutting it, you know, no cell phones back then.
No.
It was, you know, had to pick up the phone and do the old dial tone. Yeah. It wasn't a rotary back then. I'm not that old.
Sorry, I didn't know if you'd catch that.
Yeah.
You got it.
Probably you and I don't understand what a rotary phone is in this room. But so I get a nice meal. But that was kind of my, you know, what I thought I wanted to do. And then I took the LSATs. And I was not a great test taker.
Okay.
Standardized test taker.
It
wasn't my thing.
Okay.
So I did okay, but I was like, I'm not sure this is for me. So I graduated, and like many other college grads, it's like, you know, some have a focus and some have jobs lined up as soon as they get out, which is great. But I didn't. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? So it was, you know, really I leaned on my family to help. Like, who do you know that I could meet? And I guess that was the beginning of my journey of discovering who I am in someone that could build relationships. And
understood how to leverage them.
Exactly.
Right? You understood that.
Yep, exactly. And at the time, you know, I was 22 years old. I didn't know it.
Sure.
Right? I just knew I needed a job.
You did it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I did. I had a family friend who was in the health insurance business, and I was able to get an interview. And what they asked me to do was to read a health insurance contract, and then come back for the second interview, and it was almost like a test. And you know what I also learned at that time, which I kind of knew before, is that I had a great memory.
Okay.
And when I want to memorize something, I can memorize something. So that second interview, when they were asking questions about the contract, I was literally citing this particular section and quoting exactly what was written in there, to the point where the person who was interviewing me was saying, I didn't even know that.
Did you memorize
And then
this?
they had,
did you memorize?
I did. But you know, when you're in a position where, you know, I'm out of college, which was depressing. You know, right? I mean, it's like, okay, now you're in the real world, and you know that your career is about to start, and you know, that's like, you know, that's your first step.
Sure.
And to me, that was a wake-up call that, you know, all the, you know, prior 18 years of schooling, you know, it was helpful, but this is where, you know,
you have to actually put it to work for you.
Exactly.
Yes.
And this is going to determine, like, you know, look, people change careers and whatnot, but, you know, you're starting the path to your future.
Yeah.
So I took it seriously, and that's when I buckled down. So I got the job as a sales rep at a small HMO based in Tarrytown, New York. Ironically, I grew up in Rockland County, but my first job was in Westchester County. Yeah. didn't know much about Westchester. At the time, I'd have to cross the Tappan Zee Bridge, and it was even before Easy Pass. I had to buy a packet of trips, and you would go up to the person at the booth, and they'd tear it off, and you'd go through. But that's where I started my career, and that was 1994, and that's how I got my entree into the healthcare market or health insurance, and it went from there.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So you talked to me a little bit about your dad, which if people didn't catch, in some ways you were too young to see him in certain areas, right?
Yep.
Of your life. But we've talked offline about his influence in your life. Do you want to share a little bit about how your family, you can go to dad or your kids or wherever you want to go, how they've influenced kind of who you are in business and who you are as a person?
Absolutely. So, as I'd mentioned, offline to you, I'm one of four. I'm the youngest, and there's a significant gap between number 3 and 4, 10 years, and there's even a much larger gap between number 1 and number 4 of 18 and a half years.
Wow.
When I was graduating college, my dad was really going into retirement. So as a child, I saw what he did, and like I said, when I was in college at the University at Albany, he was up in Albany, so I sort of knew what he was doing, and but it wasn't, when I started my working career, he was already mostly retired, doing some consulting work on the side. So I never really got to see him in his heyday. Like I feel like my kids are seeing me right now. And it became evident to me as my career went on and on and on that I am more like my dad than I had any idea. And he is like I mentioned to you, right? So he was a New York State senator in the 60s and in the assembly, I think for a total of 8 years as a state legislator.
Yeah.
And then he was a lobbyist for New York Telephone Company, which we now all know as Verizon, for 25 plus years. And what I remember most was that, not most, but what a great memory I have is he would always throw a New Year's Day party.
Excuse me.
And his drink of choice, don't ask me why, was wild turkey.
Wild turkey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it more.
That was his drink.
Everything I learned.
That was his drink of choice. So he would have these New Year's Day parties, and it would be all the people he worked with, and it would be, legislators, and they would all come to our house for this party, and they would all bring these bottles of wild turkey. And at the end of the day, there would be a stack of bottles
of wild turkey.
Yeah. And I was in my teens at the time, and it was very tempting to
sneak a bottle, but you never did. I mean, maybe.
Well, if my kids are listening, no, I never did. If my kids are not listening, of course I did. I made the mistake. I took a bottle of wild turkey, and to this day, the only other time I drank wild turkey was the day of his funeral, where my family and we bought a bottle of wild turkey as a tribute to my dad, and we did a bunch of these, and I pretty much regretted it the next day.
Well, yeah. I mean, extenuating circumstances there.
So, but one other story about my dad is, funny enough, being with the Business Council, we do an annual trip to Albany every year.
Yeah, I've done it.
Lobby day.
Oh, yeah. It's so good.
Great
so
day.
good.
Yeah.
Yes.
And under John Ravitz's leadership as a former state assemblyman, he gets us kind of like backstage access, and there's someone who works with the Business Council, as an outside consultant. And when I first met him, he said to me, and John introduced him to me, and John said, his dad was a former lobbyist, and he said, "Your dad's Jerry Schutzer?" My dad was Jerome. He went by Jerry. I said, "Yeah, Jerry Schutzer, my dad." He goes, "Man," your dad I think he used the word gregarious. That's what's
Gregarious.
The word? Gregarious.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
He had a personality, and he goes, people knew when your dad came into the room because he could just light up a room. And
What a compliment.
yeah. And I said, really, my dad? And he called him Schutz. He goes, oh, Schutz? And I said, I've never heard my dad called Schutz. I'm called Schutz. My kids are called Schutz. Last name Schutzer, abbreviation, Schutz.
Makes
I
sense.
said, you call my dad Schutz? He goes, oh, everybody knew your dad, Schutz. Yeah, oh, yeah, he would light up a room. And I felt so great. And I remember going home and he was still alive at the time, but unfortunately suffered from dementia. So he didn't remember the person, but I really shared that story with my siblings because they probably didn't know. I mean, they knew who he was because they were more involved. You know, they were older when he was in his prime of his career.
Yeah.
But I said, hearing this story was great. And it brings me back to when I was named the board chair of the Business Council, and a post went out on LinkedIn, and one of the comments that was on there said about me, how I had the ability to light up a room. And I responded to that individual, who you know, and I said, I can't even begin to tell you how much that comment meant to me, because he didn't know my dad. He had no idea who my dad was, but he's making, a comparison of how other people look at who my dad was. And
I love it.
Yeah. So
I love it.
That was, I mean, just to me, the ultimate compliment.
This brings me to one of my favorite questions.
Yeah.
Knowing everything you know now, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? Knowing everything you know, because you're doing outstanding. Mm-hmm. You've got a beautiful family. You're in some ways probably living dreams you didn't even know you had. What would you tell that 18-year-old Jamie Schutzer?
I would tell that Jamie, that 18-year-old, to don't get discouraged, because things never came easy to me, right? School didn't come easy to me. That first job didn't come easy to me. And it's easy, and especially nowadays. I mean, there's so much negativity that surrounds us out there, and in the news, and it's easy to just get discouraged. And we all face a lot of challenges, obstacles, rejection, and if you are someone who just takes that and shuts down, it's just going to make life more difficult. So that 18-year-old, I would say, don't get discouraged. And I didn't. It just took me a lot of practice to get past being discouraged. And I would just say, work hard, be who you are, be true to yourself. One of the things I would describe, the one word I would describe me is genuine. It's just, be genuine. And,
sure.
And, people like genuine people. People like to do business with genuine people.
Yes.
People like to be friends with genuine people. And so all those challenges and objections and rejection is, you stay true to yourself and you be genuine, you're gonna succeed. It might not be the first time, it might not be the second time, it might not be the third time, but just stick to your true values and you will get there.
I think you're proof positive of all of that. And I have to say, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had fun. Did you have fun?
I had a blast.
Did you have fun?
I did. Is the time up already?
We got the time cue. We did get the
even believe it.
You can always
sit here for another hour.
I know people think it's going to be like really, really long, and then we get the time cue and they're like, wait. But that means we had fun.
We had a blast.
And I hope our audience could benefit from some of your sage advice and your very cool story. You're just starting as the chair, so we're going to have you back, I hope.
Absolutely.
When you're in, and you can share a little bit more of like how it's going and how you're helping Westchester move into the future, which I think is really important. But for right now, I want to say thank you for sharing your time and your stories with us. I want to thank the audience for joining us. This is Inside Copy and Art, the podcast.